Hi everyone, I'm Molly Briney, and this presentation is over the life and artwork of Oscar-Claude Monet, more commonly known as just Claude Monet. He was a famous French Impressionist painter, and I believe that his artwork tells a beautiful story of his life, and I'm excited to share a little bit of that with you guys right now. Claude Monet was born November 14th, 1840 in Paris, France. He was the second child to Claude and Louise Justine Monet. His father owned a grocery store and his mother was a singer. Monet's father wanted him to take over the family grocery store, but Monet had different plans. He knew he wanted to be an artist from very early on. When they were 5 years old, his family moved them to Le Havre, Normandy. Like I had mentioned earlier, Monet's art career began very early on. In his school-age years, he was often seen drawing caricatures of his teachers, friends, and townspeople. He would then go on to sell these for 10 to 20 francs. When he was a mere 11 years old, he attended an art-focused secondary school in Le Havre as well. He then took drawing lessons from a man named Jacques Aucard and found a mentor in another man named Eugene Boudin, who went on to teach him how to use different mediums and techniques, specifically oil painting. Monet's mother passed away when he was 16 years old, and he moved back to Paris, France to live with an aunt at that time. The piece that you see here is the piece that Monet is most often known as for creating first, like this is his first piece, and it is titled Views at Ruelle. So as you can tell, this is more of a realist style painting, and it has very little resemblance to the pieces that he would go on to create. So soon after this piece was painted, Monet was enlisted in the army. The year was 1861, and he was supposed to serve a 7-year term, but he contracted typhoid and was discharged in 1862. So obviously, while he was in the military, he had little time to focus on his artwork, but that changed when he came home. Upon returning from the war, his focus returned to painting and creating art. He became a student of a gentleman named Charles Glier. Under his new teacher, he learned more about new approaches to art, such as different brush strokes and the use of color. In this time, he created one of his most famous pieces, which is shown here on the left, and it is titled The Woman in the Green Dress. This piece brought some attention to him and earned him a spot at the Paris Salon exhibit, more commonly known as the Salon. This was a prestigious art exhibit that was held by the French Academy of Fine Arts in Paris. This was a yearly event, and it was an honor to be selected. So as you can tell, the piece on the left is also a more realist style painting. The woman in the painting is his lover and future wife, Camille. Many of Monet's pieces would go on to depict his first wife. As you can see on the right-hand side, that is titled Woman in the Garden, and that is a picture, a painting of his wife kneeling there. So in 1867, Camille became pregnant with their first son, and even though Monet's art was getting some attention, he was not really seeing finances come in from that, and so he was under a lot of pressure, and he did attempt to commit suicide by drowning himself when his son was 1 year old, and they do believe that was related to financial pressures and burdens. In June of 1870, Claude and Camille were finally able to get married. Shortly after getting married, the couple moved to the Netherlands, where Monet produced many pieces, including the windmill and the Zandam, which is pictured here. The couple then returned to France that same year and ended up settling in a suburb just west of Paris, and it is called Argenteuil. Excuse my pronunciations. In the early 1870s, Monet joined together with a handful of his friends that were artists. They were all tired of the standards that were being used to select artwork to be displayed at the Salon, so they created their own organization. This organization was called the Cooperative and Anonymous Associations of Painters, Sculptors, and Engravers. In 1872, Monet displayed his piece titled Impression Sunrise here, and you can see that artwork on the screen. This painting is by far one of the most impressionistic pieces that he had up to this point, and a critic even went on to use the term impressionism to describe the piece, and it was meant to be an insult, but Monet embraced the title and began creating more works that fit this reputation. In 1879, while pregnant with their second child, Camille became very ill with tuberculosis and ended up passing away. As you can see on the right-hand side, Monet painted the piece titled Camille on her deathbed as a final tribute to his wife. Following her death, Monet became very depressed and grief-stricken. His artwork depicts these emotions, and he created the Ice Drift series, which showed stark frozen landscapes in result. So you can see that depicted here on the left. So during this time, Monet became increasingly awestruck by the ways that one landscape could change throughout the day as the sunlight changed. So he went on to paint many different scenes and series of one landscape throughout the day. These resulted in stunning pieces that he's very well known for nowadays. Before Camille had passed away, her and Claude had been living in a home with Ernest and Alice Hochet. Excuse my pronunciation again. After Camille passed away, Claude continued to live with that family and then went on to be romantically involved with Alice. So Alice's husband was bankrupt and seemed to be uninvolved, but she never divorced him. It was only after her husband had passed away in 1892 that Alice and Claude were finally able to be married. So you can see Alice depicted here in the garden that her and Monet would go on to live at together. In 1881, Monet and Alice and all of their respective children, 8 in total, moved to Poissy for a very short time because Monet was not a fan, and they finally settled in Giverny. Giverny was actually spotted by Monet when he was on a train ride and he saw it through the doorway. So this beautiful new home became an inspiration for many of his famous paintings. Monet was especially fond with painting nature, and he was constantly surrounded by flowers, lilies, a pond, and a bridge at his new home and garden. And here you can see one of his pieces that he created there. Even after settling in Giverny, Monet continued to travel in search of painting inspiration. So many popular locations included the Mediterranean, Madrid, Venice, and London, where he created 2 popular series titled Houses of Parliament, which you can see on the left, and Waterloo Bridge, which is shown on the right. He created beautiful pieces during his foreign travels. His real masterpieces were awaiting him back home. During his final 2 decades of his life, Monet created the Water Lily Pond paintings, which consisted of nearly 300 canvases in total. Here are 2 of the pieces. In 1911, Alice passed away, and Monet turned his focus to a gigantic panel called Water Lilies. The series ended up being 8 room-sized panels, and each panel was over 6 feet tall. It is still known as one of the greatest art masterpieces to this day. So here is a picture of Monet working on that. Monet ended up passing away December 5th of 1926 at 86 years old. He had lung cancer. But all in all, I believe that Monet was a phenomenal artist. His life was not necessarily an easy one, but he persevered and he used his artwork as a coping mechanism and had beautiful results because of that. His art influenced many future artists and has a lasting impact on art as we know it today. These are the sources that I used for my information and my pictures. Thank you so much for listening. I hope you enjoyed and learned something.